Unlike rereading, which has been found to be one of the least effective study strategies, the following methods may seem slow in producing learning gains, but in actuality, researchers have identified these to be the most effective and most time-efficient study strategies. They are: practice retrieval of long-term memories, space out your practices, and interleave your practices using varied problems. Let's first consider retrieval practice, in other words, testing yourself on the material. You can use the testing strategies already mentioned in the Preparing for an Exam video, and you can also do the following. Create your own test questions, being sure to make questions which will require you to use different levels of thinking as according to Bloom's revised taxonomy of cognition. Even better, create a Google document with peers where others can contribute questions. Have everyone answer the questions on their own, and then meet to discuss which answers are the best, and most importantly, why. Use flashcards, whether ones you've created or ones that have already been created online, such as on ankisrs.net or quizlet.com. If you don't know the answer, pause and try to generate one instead of quickly reading the answer. This pausing and thinking will pay off later. Additionally, when testing yourself, don't forget to check your answers so that you have feedback about whether or not your answers are the best ones. You can, of course, use your notes, but another great way of getting feedback is to compare your answers with that of other students. I cannot emphasize enough how important testing is when learning. Now let's consider spacing out your practices, otherwise known as distributed practice. If you don't space out your practices, you'll give rise to an illusion of confidence where you think you are retrieving information from long-term memory when in fact there's a great chance that you are actually retrieving it from short-term memory. If you don't space out your practices, you may think you know something, but really, you know it only temporarily because it's fresh on your mind. The goal, however, is not only to know something for an exam, but to know it for the long term. This is the reason that instructors often warn students against cramming, also known as mass practice. Exactly how should you space out your practices of retrieval? Long enough that it's a bit effortful to remember the information, but not so long that you completely forget the information, resulting in having to relearn it. Many experts suggest spacing practices apart about a day for newly learned information, and then longer for information you know fairly well. In other words, the better you know something, the greater the amount of time you should have in between practices. Now let's discuss interleaving using varied problems. This study strategy entails alternating what you study instead of studying one thing at a time. For example, instead of studying the anatomy and function of a neuron thoroughly before moving on to learn about the various types of brain chemicals, alternate between the two topics. Perhaps study the neuron for 30 minutes, and then study brain chemicals for the next 30 minutes, and then repeat. You should also interleave by using varied problems. For example, if your goal is to learn the different painting styles of artists, instead of first learning all of Picasso's works before moving on to study all of Van Gogh's works and then next Da Vinci's works, mix it up. Study some of Picasso's, then look at a few of Van Gogh's, and then some of Da Vinci's. Then mix up the order and study their works again, but this time, use different paintings. Doing so will not only acquaint you with each artist's style, but it will also help you to better discriminate between them. In this way, you really deepen your knowledge of artistic styles. Notice, by the way, that interleaving is a natural way of spacing out your practices. For more information about study strategies, including additional tips as well as the research and logic underlying the tips, check out the relevant and recommended resources at the end of this video. You may also want to consider taking the Science of Learning course offered by the School of Education, or talk with an academic coach at the Learning Center to help integrate these tips into your study practice.